Okay, good afternoon. This is the Tuesday, May 3rd, 2016 work session of the Marion City Council. Welcome, everybody. What is first on our agenda here? Okay. Engineering?
You caught me off guard. I'm never first, so hold on. Give me a second here. We'll jump down to number 8 under engineering, which is the memorandum of agreement with Mr. Sutton regarding the 2016 assessment, sidewalk assessment project. We do allow within our assessment process the neighbors to either hire their own contractor or do the work themselves, as long as they meet the current design and construction codes that we have in force. In doing that, we have established a memorandum of agreement with Mr. Sutton to allow him to do his sidewalk either himself or by a contractor. We will provide the inspection and some guidance with that process. Last time that we did this was in 2010, which was a successful endeavor, so we're going to allow him to attempt that. So he thinks he can save money doing that, which he may do. So, questions? Item number 9 is concurrence with the developer agreement associated with the 2015 Central Corridor Improvement Projects Phase 2. This is the section of the corridor, Central Corridor, 6th Avenue from 26th to 31st Street. On April 10th, 2014, Council did approve a development agreement with Genesis Equities, LLC, for the construction of the corridor from 13th Street to 31st Street. This portion is the construction of the storm sewer, water main, and paving between the roundabout at 26th and 31st. The estimated cost for that is $1.949 million. As I said, this is a concurrence with the developer, as he will be contracting with Abode Construction to complete that work. We will provide the inspection for that project. I think within the electronic packet and the other packet was a itemized unit cost for that. So.
6 or 7?
It'll be 6. From the roundabout, which is basically between 6th and 7th, up to 31st. You can see the diagram within the memo shows that location.
What's the timeline for that to be completed?
I have not received one. They're hoping to complete it this year. But given the fact it's one of our public-private projects, we do not have working days associated with the project. So he will do it at his speed, but I know they're intending to get most of it, if not all of it, done this year.
Questions on that?
Yeah, questions? Number 10 is also for that project with Windstream Communications. As we construct this project, we will be placing all, if not most, if not all, of the utilities along that corridor underground. That direction was given back years ago, if not months ago, sometime. But anyway, Council will be approving or considering approval for these contracts with Windstream and then with Alliant and Mid-America and some of the cable companies to provide that undergrounding. We do require them to relocate, so it would be the undergrounding less the cost to relocate. So you will see more of these. This is the first of 3 or 4 that you'll see. We are recommending approval of that contract.
I had a question for Ryan. Is any of those cell phone towers going into that area?
Not as of yet, no. Not in this area.
Yeah, I wonder if we ought to, is there anything to plan for that, or?
That's up to the vendor, or I should say the company, Verizon, if they go in that area. Right now, it's not in the plans.
Okay, because that'd be a prime place for uptown coverage.
That's going to be up to their engineering team. We haven't discussed any of that yet. So.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Last item is number 11. Any other questions on that? Sorry. Number 11 is the request by the Height Shoes for the brick border in the sidewalk. As per the conversations at the previous meeting, Currently, our SUDAS specifications do not allow for the installation of brick or asphalt in the sidewalk area. We did, as Mike had explained to you, SUDAS does allow that, but we had specifically removed it from that because of difficulties we've had in the past with that installation and maintenance. As per the memo, we do find that they're difficult to maintain when it comes to snow and ice. I know that even our Parks Department has a difficult time up around the park with this, especially during icing conditions. We've also found that if you go around some of the brick areas that are in town that are grandfathered in, a lot of those are settled and have a lot of ponding and a lot of icing in the wintertime as well. One of the problems we have is if we go in and have to do a storm sewer project or do a utility project of some kind, we end up replacing those walks in kind, and if they're some kind of expensive brick, we end up covering that cost because it's in the right of way. So we are recommending that we not allow this. However, if it is your prerogative to do that, we would rather prefer to change the SUDAS spec and allow it something beyond a case-by-case basis. So there is, I think Mike explained, a lot of inspection that goes on when brick goes in. We would have to go back 3 or 4 times during that installation instead of just once.
That would make more sense to me.
We're not recommending any change as staff, but we'll leave it up to you guys to decide that, as usual.
Like the colored concrete, do you think that would suffice for?
We allow colored concrete so they could do that. In fact, they've already done that up there now. The brick is kind of a separate issue. It's a complication that we really just don't want to deal with. We have it in special locations, around the city park and things like that was deferred or waived by city council when that project was approved, but we have very limited locations where we would recommend that.
I guess it's more of a question. Could you do color just that little piece and not have the whole sidewalk colored?
Yeah,
so
they
it would
could.
Look like brick.
They could, and they have that now. That border area where they're proposing is colored concrete now.
Oh.
There's 2 houses on 44th, almost side by side, where the poured concrete brick form goes across the sidewalk. They have it on their driveway, and it goes right across the sidewalk.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those gray areas where it's concrete, so it meets the spec, but it's also marginally a trip hazard. But in those cases, we've allowed it.
This is motion receive and file. Should we have it on the agenda to vote on it?
Yeah, we'll have the motion to receive and file the report. If directed by council today, we will add a resolution approving or denying. Well, we'll do it in the affirmative, so we will have it to approve the deferral of the request, if that's the direction you want to go. We don't normally add those on Tuesdays, so sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on these items or any other items on the engineering?
Your Honor, can I get some direction on that? Do you want that resolution on Thursday's meeting?
Oh.
Yeah.
You know, there have been
Okay.
occasions that we've made provisions for kind of an experimental type thing, but they understood that if it didn't work out, that it would be removed or whatever. And the last one I can think of was the miniature horse that was living in the city limits and then had to be removed because unfortunately they did not dispose of the waste products of the miniature horse. And so that was rescinded, but that's the last thing I can think of that was a...
Yeah, and we would recommend too, and I didn't mention this, was that if we do this, we would probably I would suggest that we do hold harmlesses with these, thereby leaving the owner responsible for replacement, hazards, anything associated with a brick. I would not want to do it without that. That's a lot more paperwork for staff, but I would still rather do that.
Hold harmless if it ever had to be replaced or because of city work or something?
Yeah,
like
they would defer responsibility to the city or to a utility company. We write it up so that they're responsible for that.
Well, if somebody fell also, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we would try to do that. I would hope that would hold up in court, but. Okay.
I don't know, I like it, but I don't really want to add more workload to you guys, so.
I guess I expressed my feeling at the last meeting that if people think that it's okay to have that, then I think the right way to go is to change the requirement, not grant a variance from the requirement.
We get, oh, I'm sorry.
Typically, you grant a variance because there's some kind of hardship that's prohibiting the homeowner or the property owner from being able to comply with the rules as they are. And there's really no hardship here. It's just pure aesthetics. So if you think that it's okay to have it, I think you just change the rule to allow it rather than granting a variance.
We get quite a few requests for this, so it's something that if we do it on a case-by-case basis, you'll have a lot of them over time. And I think that if you're okay with it, we should do it. But if you're not okay with it, this won't be the last one. So.
Just to line the side?
No, we get everything. We get everything from that to entire sidewalks.
Okay.
And I think once you do this, you're allowing the entire frontage of the property as brick. Okay. And you end up with, unless they go in and do it with a concrete base, and like we've done, you end up with trip hazards pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a good idea.
I think they were talking about a concrete base, though, under the brick.
When I listened to the meeting, he agreed to do that if that was required, I think is what he said.
It was brought up, but I don't think that's what they wanted to do.
But if it opens the door to entire sidewalks being brick, I mean, you have to really think about that.
My concern is obviously if we go to allowing a concrete base under those pavers, then sometimes the concrete sidewalk itself will settle abnormally from the concrete base. So now we've got just the opposite in a trip hazard when we have a settling or heaving and thawing of our frost lines. So now the paver may be okay, but now we got a sidewalk that's settling, not incoherent with that. We're just creating too many. My concern is the nightmare that this would create from a long-term longevity policing, if you will, of the sidewalks. I mean, we got enough problems with our cracking and heaving and separation of concrete sidewalks, but
Sidewalks are a big issue and a time consumer for us any way you look at it.
Okay, any other questions on that? But you will put it on the agenda.
Yes, and the hike shoes have been notified that this will be discussed on Thursday.
Okay. Any other questions on any other engineering items that weren't starred? Sometimes people have questions on something that's not starred.
I don't think so.
No questions? Okay. Planning?
First item is number 3. We're going to have a public hearing on Thursday regarding a land map amendment as well as a rezoning request for property located off Oak Brook Drive, west of East Post Road, down by Menards. Subject property is highlighted in red: Oak Park Drive, Menards, Furniture Row, Community Collins, Maggid Office Building. It's approximately 8 acres on the rear of the office building's property. Specifically, the owner is looking to build a 100-bed skilled nursing unit. So it'll be 30 assisted, 40 skilled, and then 30 for the memory care side of it, 100-bed total. Currently, the property is designated for office use, our land use plan. Back in 2010, we just saw future office in this area with the presence of the existing office building and the commercial around it. The office property, office market's changed quite a bit, and we have the care facility that'd like to go in here. From a land use perspective, you have commercial to the south and west, office to the east, and you have residential, more care facilities to the north. So multifamily designation is pretty appropriate. Transitional zone or transitional land use between commercial and then moving up to the single family and the other care facility to the north. So it's pretty good transitional land use, and staff or the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the land use component. Any questions on that first part? Yes, sir.
Do they own the stuff that goes east as well?
No, there's a preliminary plat that'll be on the a future agenda. I think I provided a copy in this report, but it'll be 3 lots. Lot 1 will be the office building. Lot 2 will be this 8 acres. Lot 3 will be everything south of the building here. Lot 3 is still going to be owned by the Magid Associate or Magid organization. They may redevelop it in the future or sell it to these folks. It's kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah. So those, for what they're planning there, that won't need replatting then, or zoning?
It will need rezoning. That's the next part of my report.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what they're wanting for here is okay to put residential.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, I mean, yes, it is okay. Yes, I mean, per this request to amend the land use, and then the next request to rezone the property.
Okay, so they won't interfere. My point was they're not going to interfere. What's going side by side there is not going to interfere with each other.
Don't believe so. No.
Okay.
That's my question too, I guess. To the west of that, is that zone commercial?
That is zone C3, which is general commercial.
Okay. And to the south of it?
Same thing, C3
Okay.
general commercial. Menards has made them very well aware of, hey, if another big box comes in here, you understand you're moving into a commercial area.
Okay.
And any commercial area comes with trucks backing up with the warning
and stuff,
warning
yeah.
lights or warning sounds and everything like that. So,
is there anything that you've heard or any preliminary for someone going in there right now? For the Menards
on the Menards
property.
piece?
Yeah.
No, I've not heard anything.
Okay. Or across the street.
Or across the street.
Okay.
Yeah, those lots are all owned by Menards?
Everything's owned by the Menards on the west and south.
The only thing I would add is that I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, O1 actually used to contain a residential component, but it was proven problematic because it really created almost a zoning district where anything goes, and so housing was actually removed from the O1 zoning. So when this area was originally developed and Magid came in and developed that area, this type of use would have been a permissible use. It was only when we changed the rules on O1 in 2010 or 2011 that it created the need to come back and do this plan development.
So were the houses that were to the north of that, were they 01 at the time when they were built?
No, those were all residential.
That was
And then there's a senior facility just north of there.
right.
Lynn Haven, skilled facility there, about 40 bed. They're a multifamily.
Wait a minute, go back, please.
That's my.
5th Street?
5th Street.
5th Street, is there any possibility of that going through?
No.
Since, well, the reason I'm asking is between 11th Street and,
There is no south connections.
there's nothing between
No.
11th Street and, Highway 100.
Yeah.
To get, I mean, it's like
That was a
nothing.
That was a very specific condition that Mr. Bjornson requested of the council when he preliminary platted and zoned this property for 5th to not go through, and the council at that time agreed with him.
Some council members did.
I'm sorry. 5th Street is right here. It's a little stub street. Initially, it was developed in a manner that would be consistent to bring the street through the development. This is the vacant lot. Menards is over here. Subject property. So bringing this 5th through. But when Mr. Bjornson came in and replatted this thing, 2002, 3, or somewhere in there, he didn't want that road to extend through. The neighbors up here didn't want that road to extend through because they're worried about commercial traffic cutting through. And the council agreed with him and the neighbors, and they did not force the issue of extending this street south at this location. So this is only way in, there's 2 entrances onto the highway, of course, we're all familiar with, and one off East Post Road, and that's it.
Well, like I said, that's an awful big expanse of space without any
Yeah.
connection through.
Yeah, there's a lot of traffic coming from along Grand Avenue, west to east. Really, the only way out of this neighborhood is Grand Avenue, and then one street further north. But yet, it's kind of a long roundabout way to get there. So it's a pretty closed off neighborhood, really, for access.
Dave, you might mention that Oak Brook there is also private?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Oak Brook is a private drive along here. Everything else is public. It kind of fronts by the bank, and then the vacant lot Menards. Terry kept that as a private. At one time, he was hoping to cost share with the Maggot up to the north. They didn't want to have anything to do with the road, so he put the entire road on his own property, kept it as private. So when and if this property ever developed and they wanted to access Oak Brook onto his private street, he could then have them contribute their fair share to the cost of the street. And that's something that these folks have had to agree to put a driveway onto the street, is they are now responsible for Oak Brook from this point to this point, where they got to pay for half the construction costs. Probably some interest in there, knowing Terry, but maintenance costs of if the road does need repaired, snow, etc. So the second part of the request was the rezoning. This is the zoning map. As you can see, everything's zoned 01. They're rezoning the planned development residential. The Planning and Zoning Commission was recommending approval of the request. With the planned development, of course, you're going to get a preliminary and final site development plan, not at this next meeting, but at future meetings. They have to lay out how they're going to develop the site. I'll just briefly share that with everybody. North is to the top of the page. Oak Brook Drive, that private street I was just talking about, is right here. The Maggot office building to the east. Menards, the vacant lot, is over here. As I said, it's a 100-bed unit. Primary access will be from Oak Brook Drive to access the property. This is the assisted side, the skilled side, and the memory side. There is a second access that will be gated for emergency access only. It will not be a public or staff drive. It will be only for emergency vehicles as needed. Site's laid out pretty well. It's about one space per unit, just under. For nursing home standards, that's pretty average what we see. They have identified areas for future parking as needed. Should staffing level requirements change in the future, they'll have that additional ability. It is 3 shifts, about 50 employees total over those 3 shifts. The busiest time is holidays and shift changes when they see the most traffic on this site. They did want me to point out there is a canopy over the driveway in this location. They've been listening to the previous councils with the apartments, so they do have a sheltered canopy in this location for the residents.
1 story?
This first phase, the assisted side is 2-story up front on the south side, single story. And then there is, I'll share the color rendering. It gives there might be a little better copy in your packets, but this is looking toward, the center pod with the assisted onto the east and skilled onto the west. Drive-up canopy. This is what you would see from Oak Brook Drive, Furniture Row, if you could actually see over the berm and trees that they are maintaining. This is the assisted living side, 2 stories. Good mix of materials. Commission and staff are both happy with what they're going with there. And kind of, again, an overall site of the site, south being toward the bottom of the page, with Menards to the west here. So a very nice project, well suited, we think. Planning and Zoning Commission agreed, and they are recommending approval of the zoning. So on Thursday, there'll be a public hearing on the land use and the zoning, and then likely on the 3rd reading, we'll have a preliminary and final site development plan, which you're looking at here, as well as a preliminary plat to create the 3 lots. Then a final plat will probably follow, I imagine, in early July. Any questions? Moving on to number 8. This was a discussion regarding the request for printing materials. I think, I'm not as up to date on this one as I should be, but I believe the city is going to be providing the actual printing of the materials, not cash toward the printing, but we're just going to actually do the printing of the documents here. I mean, still there's going to be a cost of ink and paper, but that's a joint project between the MPO and the city of Marion, and that's part of our contribution to that project is to handle some of the printing. I don't think Kesha had a number on that. I can sure get that for you if you'd like. If you're looking for a final dollar cost on that, I don't know how many pages or anything like that yet, but.
We've talked about this before.
I thought we talked about it before, but it's
Yeah.
back on here, so I'm not sure if it got left on or if there was more to add to it, but
Okay.
it's not dollars for it, it's just us handling the printing, I think.
It was just to receive and file the request, I think, last time.
All right.
I see. Okay.
Number 9, I'll let Lon address this one, 'cause I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, the council had previously approved development agreements for 2 senior housing projects that were vying for tax credits from the state through the Iowa Finance Authority. This is the one that's down behind Casey's with TWG. Formerly would have been, the original corporation was Landover Development Corporation. They've now assigned it to this one. One of the things that's happened with that project is that their costs have come in higher than they anticipated, and when that happens, the Iowa Finance Authority requires, in order for them to maintain their same scoring level on the application, that the amount of local match needs to go up as well. So what will happen here, it'll be cost neutral to us. The company will actually end up agreeing to a minimum assessment agreement on the project, which will up the amount of the incremental TIF payments that they will get. Basically what that allows them to do is they can then put more of their cash flow into the tax payments that get rebated back to them. It keeps the project in line with the proportions that the Iowa Finance Authority requires for them to have for city match into the project. It doesn't actually cost us anything because they're just paying a higher tax bill during that period of time, but it keeps IFA happy.
Where exactly did these extra expenses come into play? Do you know, I mean, where did we miss the boat on that?
I think
This would be their.
Yeah, it was, from what I remember, there was a lot of fill in the site, and they ended up having to do a lot more over-excavation and compaction in order to make sure that it was suitable for their foundations.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Number 10, we were hoping to have a scope of work completed, but we didn't quite get that finished up, so that'll likely be on a future agenda, so we'll just, I really don't have any discussion on number 10. And then we had 2 new items. I do want to touch briefly on number 12. This request just came in, and it hasn't been sent out to anybody yet, but I didn't, before any questions came up, I want to do this pretty... Dan and Darren got their fancy computers. This works just as well. This is the Zimmerman Hoduck site, McDonald's, in this location, so Marion Boulevard. With item number 10, they have requested to purchase some of this property in this triangle here. This is the billboard. You can see the railroad overpass. It's a little triangle piece. It's actually leftover right-of-way. It's still right-of-way technically. It's leftover right-of-way, as there used to be a street that went. There's the old part of the old street that used to go through underneath the bridge at one time. So just some leftover right-of-way. They've requested to purchase it. We just got this in last week. We haven't even sent it out to staff. But just first look on this one, without knowing the future of Alburnett, the future of the bridge, it's just right away. We probably not like be in a position to really want to sell at this time until we have the overpass. Whether it stays, whether it goes, whatever happens there. I just hate to sell land that we may need to.
Who's asking to buy it?
Yeah. It's Zimmerman Hoduck, Clint, I think.
I agree.
I think it's just a receive and file, but I'd like to get back to him soon. One thing we have done in the past, and then we've actually done on this property, this first row of parking in this area is all actually on city property. They just got an encroachment agreement 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I think, to actually pave a portion of this. I don't think they pay anything for it. I'd have to pull my records, but
The agreement was that if the city needed to take it back, then they would be responsible for removal of the concrete.
That's something that could be done here again with that project, everything moving kind of fast right nowadays. I'd still hate to have them even pave in this area and have to rip it out 2 years later if the city's moving faster than like we hope, so.
They just want more parking is what they're,
What's that?
they just want more parking, they're just gonna pave it?
I think they just need more parking for cars, so, again, we're gonna send it out to staff. I'd like to get a little direction from council tonight so I can get back with Clint and let them know if the city council's even remotely interested at this time, or hold off and see what we don't need after a project's done.
The first thought that entered my mind was Alburnett Road, you know.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
going on with the bridge, yeah.
Yeah, who knows what we do with the bridge, if the bridge stays or goes. If the bridge goes, we might need it to backfill, to get the slopes right and everything. I just hate to have to buy back property later.
Well, if it was sold at the rate of like alleys being sold, and then all of a sudden the city needed it and would say, oh, we'll give you 100 times what you know.
What you're required to give them at that time and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing just probably not at this time. Is that what I've heard?
Can you talk about 11? Oh, I'm sorry, once you're done with this.
Oh, no, yeah, oh, yeah, Joe, I'm sorry.
Didn't we talk about something on the lot back to the left about stormwater for these guys?
Yeah, I think at one time they were back in here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was city property or they were wanting to.
I can't remember what they were asking for.
Yes, they were. They were asking for something. I don't recall. Is that what it was?
That's what it was. It was a basin.
I think
They
it's
wanted to
city
put
property. I think it was actually in the floodplain. I think there was just a lot of confusion as how does a basin work in a floodplain? I mean,
Yeah.
they do, but there was a lot of, it's hard to explain too. I don't think it ever materialized beyond that.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on that? I'm sorry, otherwise I did kind of hear we're not proceeding at this time, or,
I think we all agree to wait.
okay. I'll let Clint know, and if he wants to pursue it, he can do that on his own then. Okay.
Could we move that bridge over onto Tower Terrace Road? Would that work?
You get a little wider and a little longer probably, so.
You get Coonrod to move it, Paul.
We can do her. Fall fast, Eddie.
Can you talk about 11?
Number 11. Oh yes, this is an alley that was vacated 3 or 4 years ago. Quite a bit of controversy on the vacation. Some owners wanted to sell it. There were some land disputes there. So they just decided not to sell it at that time, 3 or 4 years ago. But the council then did give the owner, Anna Rowell at the time, Anna Lage, who's the request today, they gave her an encroachment agreement into that alley for a garden and a solid fence. So she's had her garden there. She's had a kind of a chicken wire fence, those little 2-foot things, just for her garden. I think some dynamics have changed in that neighborhood again, and she'd just like to try to purchase the entire alley, the 10 feet. By city policy, though, I do offer the adjacent property owner their half. If they don't want it, then she can get her 10 feet. This will have some controversy to it, I'd imagine.
It's already vacated.
It's already been vacated, so it's just city
before
property.
we agree to sell to her, we will offer the half to the other adjacent owner or owners. Okay.
And it was.
Well, we've had these discussions before. That's what I want to make sure that.
This is what we will do unless they agree to another.
Yeah.
3 years ago, the owners at the time, it was a contract purchase, and the owners at the time, they only wanted 2 feet. But there's a whole lot of personalities involved, unfortunately, and it didn't work out. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Any other questions on that for Dave?
Great.
There'll be a couple of changes on mine for Thursday evening, Mayor. Number 2, the resolution for the public hearing, that will actually be removed. We're not quite ready to set that yet. That'll be pushed back until the next city council meeting, so you'll see that one come back. And then there'll be a couple of items that will be added. In a prior council meeting, the council had directed staff to negotiate a development agreement with Russ Miller for the Lebeda project. That agreement is ready to go, so we'll be having a resolution to set hearing for the approval approval of the development agreement and then also the amendment of the urban renewal plan for that. We also then will have a motion or a resolution directing staff to negotiate a development agreement for a potential project in the Irwins building with Primus Construction as the primary contractor on that. And then finally, last night, the Marion's Linn-Mar School Board unanimously approved the purchase agreement for the right-of-way that we need for Tower Terrace Road. So we'll put that on the agenda for the council for Thursday night to get that one finally done, and then we can start proceeding with construction on that next leg.
Questions?
Have you done anything further as far as the local option sales tax with the elderly for assistance on sidewalks?
No.
Why not?
I have not received direction from the city council to do that. It's not in the strategic plan, nor is it in the budget. But one of the things I think the council should remember is that when our consultant was in, you had to give me the ability to say no if it wasn't in the strategic plan. If you want to amend the strategic plan to include that through full council action, then yes. But otherwise, at this point, it appears to me to be an initiative of one city council member and not the full council.
Well, I just hope that when the rest of y'all get to be a certain age, that there is somebody like me that looks out after the welfare of the elderly in this town, who even when things were bad and the railroad left and all, these people didn't. They stayed in Marion. They did their shopping here. They kept the city going. And I think it's despicable to just kind of discard them. That's my opinion.
I'll go on record as saying that I like the idea of doing something like that. I don't know if I agree with using lost money, but if there's some type of something to do where if someone is on a fixed income or
elderly
or something where they couldn't afford to pay for their portion, that maybe the city has some type of program. So I'd be for that.
Being
something like that.
It's income, age of the person, and the length of time they have lived at that address. Because if this Mr. Campbell, there's I think 2 houses that front on that street, and they've lived there forever. You know, and then all of a sudden now we tell them that they need a sidewalk?
Yeah, I would be for more of income and not age.
Well, age has a lot to do with it.
Well, I agree it does, but that someone could be living there for 50 years and they might be a millionaire. I mean, and they can afford to pay for it.
Like
You never know. They make more money
than
than me, I don't know. So
They would be millionaire.
And, from the staff side, we're perfectly willing to do that, but we need to know that this is something that the entire council wants us to do, because if you remember from our strategic planning conversations, if you've got 10 people, 10 minutes, and $10, the council has to decide through the strategic plan, what do you want us to focus on? That's exhibited in the budget, and then the staff puts their work plans together for the entire year based off of that. So when you start bringing up initiatives that hit us in the middle of the year, we start having to adjust work plans. Something has to give in order to be able to do that. Now, if it's something you want the local option sales tax committee to consider, that's perfectly fine. If council wants us to do that, we would just do that at their next meeting, which their next regularly scheduled meeting would be in June, because we just held one in April.
Well, my problem is that's infrastructure, and 70% of local option sales tax is to go for infrastructure. I don't see what the problem is.
I think from the staff side, the concern I get into, 2. One is precedent. We've never done that for years and years and years. You've got 20 years of doing this program where we have required everybody to pay for it. And now all of a sudden you're changing the rules because you've got one person that wants you to change the rules. The second one is that if you look, all of the projects that are being done out of local option sales tax are being done for public benefit, not individual benefit. And if you set up a program out of local option sales tax that is exclusive benefit to one individual property owner, you're really opening a door that I'm not sure that the city council wants to open, nor one that I think when the voters approved the local option sales tax based on that spending plan, I'm not sure they necessarily would have agreed with that if we were going to be going around and targeting that money towards individual property owners rather than accruing the benefit towards the public as a whole. Again, maybe if the council wants to do it, there are other sources besides local option sales tax that could be looked at for doing that. Would it fit in the ballot language? That would be for the committee to decide. Certainly, I think it would. It's just the council has to make that decision of, that's that difference between would and should.
Well, the whole thing being, there was no local option sales tax 20 years ago. So this is not something that somebody can come back and say, okay, I had to put my sidewalk in, but it was before that, so therefore I should be compensated for what I paid for. No, because it was not in existence.
But it has been for the last 6 years.
That's right. But then, well, we never got a request of this nature, of an elderly person, 85 years old.
Mary Lou, can I suggest something? Since the local option sales tax will sunset, I hope, that funding for that will go away. Why don't we look at having staff investigate how to fund that out of something else?
And you have to be very careful, because as you may recall from what Ryan discovered in doing research, using age as a determination for having a different program for someone, if you do a strict reading of the state code, isn't legal. Length of time that someone has lived in a property, you're disenfranchising more than half of the people of Marion, whatever, if you set the threshold at 15 years. Income is an accepted one. A lot of federal programs are based on that. I don't think that one would introduce any potential. Just looking at it from a risk management standpoint, you want to make the program eligibility as tight as you can using standards that are generally acceptable in the courts.
Well, they wouldn't be paying for the whole thing. It would be assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I just think that the elderly in this town are not really taken care of.
Well, rather than base it on something that may sunset, why don't we base it on like income, something that's legal, and something that's...
What is the policy, excuse me, what is the policy? Do we assess for the entire thing?
I'll let engineering cover that. It has to,
Isn't it just a portion?
As a city, we actually cover half of the sidewalk costs for the assessment program, which fills gaps. That's one program. But we do not pass on the costs of any retaining walls, driveway work, grading work, anything associated with it. The council in the past has directed us only to charge for half of the sidewalk cost.
The portion of the cost.
Yeah, we're probably charging less than 25% of the project cost to the owners.
But the problem is, once again, if they cannot pay the whole thing right off and it gets added on, they're paying interest on however long that goes. And when you're 85 years old, I mean, gee whiz.
That's why you say that, we've never done it before. Well, laws change, things change. I don't think that it should have to do with 100% income, if you ask me. I mean, base it off of income and doing a portion, and because it can be expensive for some people when they're on a fixed income. And I don't think it has to do with, I like the idea not because one person brought it up. I like the idea because it can help a lot of people in the future. And I don't see that it would be, it's setting a new standard, really it is. And it's going forward and doing something that's good for the community.
If you use income as a base, there are precedents for that already within the city to do that. The Park and Rec program, for example, has scholarship programs for families that are based on income. When we've done housing rehab projects in the past and used local dollars to match those are exclusively income-based. A good percentage of them do end up being elderly, just by the nature of being on fixed incomes. Again, I want to make sure before we shift gears and start devoting staff time and effort and budget resources to this that it's something that the entire council agrees with. I don't want to bring it to the council and have spent 3 months researching it, developing a program, figuring out how this is going to work, and have it go down on a 4-3 vote. I've got to know that it's something that the council is supportive of before we put that time and effort into it.
And I'm not thinking, I don't know about Mary Lou, but I don't think that it should be something that we try and get put into place for this next round of sidewalks. I mean, it's something for next year. So have a little bit of time to get it figured out for sure, and that way maybe next year we can have it in place and then for future sidewalk repair.
I hesitate to bring this up, but I can go back a few years and tell you what the percentage of those projects are brought back, charged against the adjacent owners, and we can have those numbers for you. It may be that instead of adding paperwork to staff's time, you may reduce that paperwork and just do away with the assessment program. We go to a sidewalk gap filling program, and we just do that without, I mean, we spend months putting together an assessment process, where if we do away with that 25% that we're charging back to the owners, which is probably not what Lon wants to hear, but if we do that, we've saved a lot of time, effort, staff, the whole bit for what is becoming a fairly minor amount part of that overall project cost.
What is the true cost per linear foot for a sidewalk?
I can't give you that. I don't know. True cost as far as with retaining walls and...
No, just flat work. We need to put I'm just trying to figure out, is this, are we dealing with $10 a foot? I'm just trying to figure out what...
We're about $16 a foot. I think we're about $4 a square foot, if I had to guess.
So would it be more cost effective just to pay for the whole thing than to waste, or not waste?
I'd like to do a study
staff
on that and talk to Lon about it, but I think that's more of an option than trying to do some complex program that is going to take more staff time.
Sure. I didn't look at it that way, so.
So is everybody okay with him looking at that?
I'd like to see what, for sure, what.
I'll just go ahead and send out an email in the next few days of what percentage is being assessed back against the adjacent owners.
Yeah. So
it may cut back like one sidewalk project for our funding. Is that,
Yeah,
would that be the repercussion to that?
The balancing act you always have to have is, we have tried to bolster funding to that sidewalk program to get more sidewalks done, to catch up. Because as a community, a lot of our sidewalks are aging. It's gotten more expensive. Even with the amount of additional budget we've been able to put towards that, we're probably not gaining ground. So if we budget $100,000, even if $25,000 is coming in by the property owners, then realistically you're going back to a $75,000 a year program unless you appropriate other dollars to supplement to bring that number up. Same thing though, to Dan's point, on some programs you do reach a point where you're spending dollars to save pennies. And that's not a productive use of anyone's time or resources. So if this is a project that has reached that point, then maybe it's time to just look at doing it differently going forward.
That seems to make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But this just brings up unrelated to this specific topic, but brings up a reminder, I think, for all of us on the council, is that, and I think, without thinking about it, sometimes we just say, well, I want to see you do this, or I want to see you do that. And it's happened several times that I've noticed, and I think it is a fair point to make for the sake of the staff that we're a 7-member council. Not me, none of us alone can direct city staff or should be directing city staff to spend time on something. It should come through the council as a whole, all of us together directing as a group something to be worked on, especially when it's something that isn't part of their current work plan and their strategic plan, and it diverts their time away from what we've already directed them to work on as a group. It should, if there's something that's going to vary from that or whatever it is, it should all come through a joint decision of the entire council. So, and not that anybody's doing that on purpose. I'm not insinuating that at all. I think sometimes we just,
Well, I would like to add one more thing. We look at splash pads for little kids. We look at skate parks for little kids. We look at ball diamonds for little kids. Well, okay, fine, but eventually these little kids are going to get old, and who's going to look after them then?
Those are good points to make, but I'm just talking about in general, about us directing the staff or asking the staff to work on specific things or go off on a certain path to research something or to get us this or that. And I think that those things, to the extent that we can remember, should come through a joint decision of the council. If we can just kind of keep that in mind. So,
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I had an occasion today to be out on 35th and 29th with a couple neighbors, and they asked a question, Dan, that I couldn't answer, and that is, have we considered, or doesn't it work, to color the curbing mix something in the concrete to color that curbing, so you can see that when you drive through there better. You know what I mean, the curbing, the little
Yeah,
thing
we
that-
haven't painted the project yet.
Well, but could we color the concrete? Is that doesn't work, or?
In a future project, we could.
I mean,
unless we-
isn't that a good thought? I mean, maybe when
Yeah,
we.
it probably wouldn't hurt. I don't know, that's atypical of what's normally done with that situation, but I don't see why we
But
couldn't.
I was thinking then we wouldn't have to paint it for a while anyway, if we
Yeah,
could.
we don't actually paint the curbs, we'll paint a line around the curbs.
Right.
The other issue we've had out there, all of those islands, the center pads are supposed to be a dark gray, and they put a cure on them that they assured us would be clear, and as they put that on, it's not turned dark.
No, it hasn't.
So we are working through that problem, that challenge with the contractors, so that those islands will be much more apparent once we're done with them.
Okay, they're doing great. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
they're moving
moving
right along.
forward. They've worked in the rain and under adverse conditions. But it would seem, we might think about,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they'll be much more apparent once we're done, but it's a good point that the visibility for me as well, especially the way they are right now, is pretty hard to see.
Some of the old people that Mary Lou is talking about would be me, and I have a hard time seeing those at night,
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? That it? All right, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.